Number 10. Alcatraz. The Rock was the ultimate American prison. It was the place where scores of the country's worst criminal offenders, bloodletters, bad men, and escape artists called the end of the line. The initial prison was built in 1859, but fell into disuse by the 1920s. It was then reopened in 1933 to be an escape-proof federal prison. It was a brutal place of punishment and confinement with few privileges. In 1946, several inmates attempted a violent and bloody escape from the Rock, but failed. There were a handful of other escapes, but only one successful escape in 1962. Using handmade rubber rafts and dummies with real hair, vanished into the dark waters of the bay. Alcatraz was closed down 1 year later, in 1963. Regarded as one of America's most haunted places, ghosts have been widely reported ever since, even by staff members of the National Park Service, which now operates the property. Ghosts have been sighted along with strange sounds, screams, yells, weeping, and eerie music. Number 9. Ohio State Reformatory. The Ohio State Reformatory, made famous in the film The Shawshank Redemption, was opened in 1896, and it saw untold thousands of prisoners during its years of operation, and while once applauded as a place that could humanely reform first-time offenders, the conditions deteriorated to the point that it became known for abuse, torture, and execution. Already considered overcrowded and inhumane by the 1930s, the massive prison was kept open until 1986, even after a federal lawsuit was filed by the inmates that cited that it was unfit for human occupation. Since the closing of the reformatory, stories have circulated that it is haunted by the tormented spirits of former inmates, guards, and prison officials who have simply never left. Apparitions have been reported, footsteps have been heard, and unsettling encounters have taken place in the cells where the inmates once lived, suffered, and sometimes passed away. Number 8. Lake County Jail. The Lake County Jail, located in the county seat of Crown Point, was built in 1908 and enlarged 20 years later. At that time, county sheriffs were required to live at the jail, and so the combined residence and jail included all the facilities needed for its purpose as a law enforcement institution. Located within the walls were the family's living area, warden's residence, department offices, 150 cells, maximum security accommodations, institutional kitchen, food storage, heating and cooling systems, barbershop, and a garage. It was considered to be one of the finest in Indiana and thought to be escape-proof. However, on March 3rd, 1934, gangster John Dillinger proved it to be otherwise when he made a daring escape that gave the jail its continuing infamy. The jail remained in operation until the 1970s, when it became a historic site. As restoration has continued over the last 2 decades, stories have emerged about a haunting at the jail. Apparitions have been seen in cells and corridors, strange photographs have been taken, doors open and close by themselves, lights turn on and off, and disembodied footsteps and voices have been reported by volunteers and visitors alike. What do you think they have in the garage? Comment down below. I personally think it's a lotus. Number 7. Pottawatomie County Jail. Built in 1885, the old Pottawatomie County Jail is one of the most unusual houses of incarceration in America. The jail has a 3-tier cell block with 10 cells on each tier. It was originally designed to rotate continuously throughout the night by means of a water wheel in the basement, earning it the nickname of the Squirrel Cage Jail. In this way, all of the prisoners could be watched from a central location. Unfortunately, the 45-ton cell block was simply too heavy to work right, and it became stuck frequently. Eventually, the jailers gave up on the plan, and a night guard had to be hired. The cylinder continued to be used until 1960, when a prison passed in his cell and the cell block jammed, trapping the body in the cell for several days. After that, cell doors were cut into every cell. The jail was closed down in 1969, and during its history, 4 passes occurred within its walls. One man passed away from a heart attack, another in a fall when he tried to write his name on the ceiling, another ended himself in his cell, and the last after an accident when an officer accidentally shot himself in the confusion of protecting the jail from an angry mob during the farmers' holiday strike of 1932. It's no surprise that these unlucky individuals, along with others, are believed to still linger at the old jail. Number 6. West Virginia Penitentiary. The prison was built on the edge of Moundsville in 1866. The prison remained open for 129 years, finally closing down in 1995. During that time, the structure housed thousands of prisoners. Many lost their lives here through both state-sanctioned executions and during prison violence. Since its closure, the prison has become known as one of the most haunted sites in history. Staff members and visitors alike have reported ghosts in North Hall, where the most dangerous inmates were housed, in the execution chamber where Old Sparky sent many to an early grave, and the Hole, a brutal solitary confinement area that often drove inmates to insanity and thoughts of ending themselves, with passings, violence, executions, and horrible conditions combining to make a terrifying haunting. Ghost hunters have flocked to the former penitentiary over the years. Visitors claim to have experienced the sound of phantom footsteps, voices and noises that have no explanation, inexplicable cold chills, overwhelming feelings of panic, and more. Number 5. Missouri State Prison. During its operation, it saw many infamous prisoners, including Charles Pretty Boy Floyd, James Earl Ray, and Bobby Greenlee's kidnappers Carl Austin Hall and Bonnie Heady. They were executed at the prison. In 1954, there was a major riot at the penitentiary. The Missouri State Highway Patrol, Missouri National Guard, and police departments from Jefferson City, St. Louis, and Kansas City, Missouri, were called in to help quell the disturbance. When it was all over, 4 inmates had been executed, 29 had been injured, and there had been 1 attempt on someone's own life. 4 guards had been seriously injured and several buildings had been burned. During its operation, 40 inmates were executed in the gas chamber, and Time magazine once called it the bloodiest 47 acres in America for the frequent violence inside its walls. It probably comes as no surprise that since its closure, the penitentiary has become a hotspot for paranormal activity. Staff members and visitors have reported dozens of eerie encounters with lingering spirits, which have been seen, heard, and encountered firsthand. Number 4. Shrewsbury Prison. The Shrewsbury Prison in Shropshire is one of the oldest prisons in the UK, and in addition to its dark history, it's a given that this jail is one of the most haunted in the UK as well. This prison opened up all the way back in 1793, all the way until 2013, meaning 2 centuries of people went through this place. During the Victorian period, large audiences would assemble to see public executions, some of which were people who had been given the execution penalty for crimes like stealing bread. Apart from that, this prison went through many other public executions, torturing, and many taking their own lives. Visitors to the prison claim that a shadow man lurks in the prison's A-wing. It's said that he's a former police officer, since they are known to scare people away from the A-wing as if they were still working their job. Oddly enough, this jail has an escape room within the cells of the former inmates, so if you were looking for something for a real experience, that would be your best bet, just for the price of £69. Number 3. Wyoming Territorial Prison. The Wyoming Territorial Prison in the city of Laramie opened its doors in 1873, and over its time of being active, it would have many problems with overcrowding, causing many prisoners to be bunched together in already terrible living conditions. This prison is not like the other typical haunted prisons. It didn't have horrific executions, nor did it have riots or mistreatment. Instead, this prison is haunted due to a select few spirits that chose to stick around here for whatever reason. The spirit is believed to be that of Julius Greenwelch, who was an inmate in the 1890s. He was set there because he executed his wife after finding her at his favorite brothel. During his days at the prison, he became so notorious for his talent in cigar rolling that he was allowed to set up a cigar making business while behind bars. However, in a few years, he would pass away from a heart attack, causing his business to never grow the way he envisioned. Ever since, the prison has parts of it smell like cigar smoke, with the guards and locals claiming the smell is the spirit of Julius. Number 2. Napier Prison. Located in Napier Hill, New Zealand is the Napier Prison. Built in 1862, this prison lasted over 130 years until it eventually closed in 1993. Now, this prison was once used as an orphanage and then a psychiatric hospital, so it's really no surprise at all that this place is considered one of the most haunted places in New Zealand. During the time it was active, this place was the last place many people saw in their lives, because many execution sentences were done inside of this prison. The most notorious of the execution sentences was the one given to Roland Edwards. He was a mass slaughterer who was sentenced to execution in the gallows, but ever since, he has been said to haunt the prison with a special appearance on the anniversary of his passing. He passed away on July 15th, so this is when many paranormal investigators visit the prison for the chance to speak to Roland. Now, there are ghost tours that go through the prison, but make sure you never go alone, because nighttime security guards often report unexplained footsteps and doors slamming on their own when they walk the grounds alone. Number 1. Wyoming Frontier Prison. Located in Rawlins, Wyoming, the Wyoming Frontier Prison has the reputation of being one of the toughest prisons in the Wild West. Opened in 1901, it housed some of the most violent inmates, featured a dungeon, botched executions, and was known for rampant violence. Now a museum, employees and visitors alike have reported ghostly encounters. There have been apparitions spotted in the cell blocks and reports of a malevolent spirit in the dungeon who has threatened visitors. The prison is so notorious that it was featured on an episode of Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, and ghost hunters have captured orbs on camera. The museum offers haunted Halloween night tours if you want to have a ghostly encounter of your own. At number 10, a bone-chilling occult incident happened to a guard at this prison. Here's what he said happened. One night I was working in a different area, but I got a call on the radio. Flash, 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 offender in need of emergency medical care. That was the initiation of ICS, and usually meant there was a problem. Usually a fight or a severe injury. Turns out this was an execution, and I swear this is something out of True Detective. There was an inmate face down in his bunk, tied up with bed sheets, deceased, with blood everywhere. The executed inmate was shirtless and had runes carved into his back. The other inmate was curled into a ball, muttering, "Demons, demons." It turns out the deceased inmate wasn't deceased, but really close to it. He was sent out on a 911 call and later passed away at the hospital. As for the executioner, no one could get a motive. One of the neighboring cellmates said he heard everything and described all the screams and the inmate saying the demons are coming. Ooh, chills down my spine. At number 9, Lauren Landavazo was walking with her friend Michaela Smith on September 2nd, 2016. The pair were walking home after school along a typically suburban footpath. At some point, the two girls were approached by a young man in a car. That young man was 20-year-old Cody Lott. Lott would later give two explanations for why he did what he did that day. He was jealous because Landavazo seemed to have a boyfriend, and the devil wanted him to do it. Regardless of which one is the truth, Lott opened fire on both girls with a .22 caliber rifle.
Shooting victim Michaela Smith's mom was also trying to figure out what was going on in that alley her daughter always walked down with her dear friend Lauren and other students. That's when she called Michaela.
Smith, who managed to survive the ambush, told police that Lott had made eye contact with her first before pulling the trigger. At his 2018 trial, Lott repeated that it was the devil that had helped him plan the shooting. The prosecution stuck with the idea that Lott was mentally unstable and angry over his inability to find a romantic partner.
Lauren looked directly at her killer in court and told him he may have taken her life, but he will never kill her spirit, as he says they will make it their life's work to ensure Lauren's legacy is always alive.
At number 8, the attempted execution of Peter Churm. According to his grieving family, 65-year-old Peter Churm was a beloved father and grandfather. Tommy Smith did not care about any of this. The only thing he cared about on February 24, 2015 was getting the keys to Churm's Range Rover. When Churm stepped in to stop the young punk from stealing his vehicle, Smith, who had already been convicted of a staggering 57 offenses, pulled out a knife and stabbed Churm in the head, back, neck, chest, and arms. The stabbing attack was so frenzied that Smith actually snapped the 8-inch knife in two. Smith went on trial for attempted execution in March 2016. Smith told the Wolverhampton Crown Court that he was not responsible for his actions as he had been possessed by a demon on that terrible day. The court more than likely did not buy his possession story, but they did take into account that Smith had been previously diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. As such, he was cleared of the charge of attempted execution. Number 7, cheating with demons. Way back in 1974, 1 year after the release of the classic film The Exorcist, an exorcism was carried out in the sleepy town of Ossett, West Yorkshire, England. The possessed subject was one Michael Taylor, a 31-year-old married father of 5 children. Most who knew Taylor described him as a cheery fellow, although he was prone to fits of depression now and then. For the most part, these black moods were the result of a back injury that made it hard for Taylor to maintain steady employment. Things began to change in the Taylor household when they joined the Christian Fellowship Group, a local church organization. The previously irreligious Michael began regularly attending church services. One of the reasons for this dramatic change was 21-year-old Mary Robinson, the group's preacher. Robinson convinced her congregation that the power of God could drive out their demons. Outside of these meetings, some in Ossett began to claim that Robinson and Taylor were carrying on an affair. The more Taylor became involved with Robinson, the more his attitude began to change. The once chipper man became easily irritated and foul-tempered. Things came to a head when Taylor and Robinson were found naked together. Taylor blamed this on an evil presence within himself, and a local Anglican vicar was called in to perform an exorcism. During an all-night ceremony in October 1974, the vicar and other ministers apparently drove out 40 demons, including the demons of bestiality, incest, lewdness, and blasphemy. Number 6, the execution of Angie Escobar. On September 10th, 2015, a body was discovered inside of an abandoned car in the Whitestone section of Queens, New York. The body belonged to 28-year-old Angie Escobar, who had passed away after being stabbed some 80 times. The medical examiner in the case found that Angie had been terminated 4 days prior to her discovery. Before long, the NYPD zeroed in on a suspect, 31-year-old Louis Zambrano of Flushing, Queens. Zambrano was arrested on September 18th after fleeing to Virginia. Zambrano ultimately confessed to police that he had stabbed Escobar with a pair of scissors after the single mother admitted that she wanted to break off the relationship. In pleading guilty, Zambrano claimed that he had been possessed by a demon at the time of the termination. Zambrano also blamed trust issues for his actions. At number 5, Mama Butcher. The case of Elizbieta Plakowska involved multiple possessions. First of all, Plakowska believed that her son Justin and daughter Olivia were possessed by demons. At the same time, Plakowska was possessed by an entity that she called the Black Shadow. Of course, once Plakowska went on trial, her defense team turned her possession story into a plea of insanity.
Now, the defense was trying to prove that Plakowska was not guilty by reason of insanity when she stabbed her 7-year-old son Justin and a 5-year-old girl named Olivia, who she babysat in October 2012.
Dr. Philip Resnick took the stand and testified that the 45-year-old accused executioner had suffered a psychotic episode prior to carrying out the gruesome crime. As the trial continued, jurors learned the horrific truth that Elizbieta had stabbed her son 100 times and her daughter Olivia 50 times. The jury also learned that Elizbieta had originally told the police that an unknown stalker had carried out the executions after breaking into the family's Naperville home. At number 4, the first Brookline execution since its founding. Brookline, Connecticut is the type of town where deadly occurrences don't really happen. In fact, when 40-year-old Alan Bono was ended on February 16, 1981, it was Brookline's first termination since the town had been founded 193 years earlier. The guilty party had stabbed Bono more than 20 times with a common pocket knife. The perpetrator, 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson, went to trial proclaiming a most unusual defense, not guilty by reason of demonic possession. Without the demon possession story, this would have been an easy open and shut case. Johnson had stabbed his landlord Bono after a pair had gotten into a heated argument and was then arrested by police just 2 miles away from the crime scene. However, the roots of the case's weirdness began a year earlier on July 3rd, 1980. On that night, 11-year-old David Glatzel woke up screaming. He told his parents that he had seen a demon in his dreams, a demon with pointed ears, sharp teeth, and cloven hooves. David called his demon the Beast Man. The Glatzel family and Johnson decided to contact Connecticut-based demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren as part of their final attempts to rid David of the Beast Man forever. Johnson said at the trial that he had told the Beast Man to enter his body. Well, that sure did complicate things. At number 3, the Uber Demon. Dalton, 48, carried out one of the most inexplicable mass tragedies in the US. On February 20th, 2016, Dalton, an Uber driver, shot and ended Mary Lou Nye and her sister-in-law, Joe Nye, Dorothy Judy Brown, Barbara Hawthorne, and Richard Smith and his son Tyler. In between some of these drive-by shootings, Dalton continued to pick up passengers and drop them off at their destinations. During his interrogation, Dalton told detectives that the Uber mobile app began changing his personality. I know you guys are going to have a hard time believing this, but it literally took over my mind and body, Dalton told investigators. Dalton further elaborated that he saw the symbol of the Eastern Star inside the Uber app, and a horned devil head regularly appeared on his phone's screen whenever he logged on for work. In short, Dalton blamed his execution spree on the fact that he had been possessed by a demon hiding in the Uber app. Not very believable, in my opinion. Number 2, Russian cultists. In a forest outside of the city of Yaroslavl, 4 mutilated corpses were found. The bodies had been desecrated beyond belief. Plus, execution investigators also learned that the victims had been robbed either before or after passing away. Still, despite this fact, the sheer brutality of the crime led investigators to believe that robbery was not the motive. The investigators were right. The crime had been carried out by 6 self-proclaimed Satanists, led by a young man named Nikolai Ogolobyak. Prior to the executions, the gang of Satanists had carried out several animal sacrifices, but felt that humans had to be removed in order to please Lucifer. Therefore, Ogolobyak and his brood ended and dismembered the 4 teens as part of an initiation ritual, and according to some reports, also ate parts of their victims' bodies. Number 1. Dungeons and Demons. The execution of Vonda and Paul Bellofato was premeditated. Sean Sellers had stripped down to his underwear to avoid getting blood splatter on his clothes, and he tried to pose his victims in such a way as to make investigators think that an unknown intruder was responsible. Such planning hinted at an experienced exterminator, which is what Sean was. A year earlier, Sean had shot and ended a Circle K convenience store clerk named Robert Paul Bower, after the clerk had refused to sell him beer. Sellers never hid the fact that he was responsible for all 3 terminations. Convicted and sentenced to execution, Sellers remains the youngest criminal ever sentenced to execution in America since 1976. While languishing in prison, Sellers found fame as a born-again Christian and a crusader against the occult. At his trial and afterwards, Sellers maintained that he had embraced Satanism after becoming addicted to the fantasy role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. Sellers, who also claims that he was at one time possessed by a demonic entity, became a fixture on television shows and conducted interviews with Geraldo Rivera and Oprah Winfrey. These interviews often saw Sellers speak as an expert on Satanism and occult practices. Number 10. Catching Crazy. Ada Barker had been an insane asylum nurse in El Paso, Texas, but in 1902, she became a victim of robbery and it was claimed she lost her senses after the ordeal. Having no immediate family in the area, the police placed the traumatized woman in the county jail until a judge could decide whether to wait until family arrived to claim her or simply send her to the insane asylum. According to the physicians who treated the woman after the robbery, Ada caught the crazy after being a nurse in an insane asylum and not because of the robbery. Number 9. She's not insane. In 1912, former insane asylum nurse Amelie Leonard escaped from the Worcester State Hospital for the insane. Previous to her incarceration in the mental hospital, she had been a nurse there. However, she was also a thief and was caught stealing valuables from the inmates. She was arrested and immediately the doctors said she had to be insane. Remember, nurses were prone to catching the crazy from their patients. Amelie was placed in the asylum, but she was obviously having none of it. One night she put her nightdress over her street clothes and tucked a roll-up blanket into her bed to look like she was asleep. She escaped through the asylum and into the night. Number 8. Bad nurses. An almhouse owned by the Marsh family in Massachusetts in 1883 had been taking in paupers and making them care for the insane patients sent to them. It was clearly a disaster. Insane women who were cared for by the pauper nurses endured the worst treatment imaginable. When it came to bathing, it was said that the nurses made half a dozen people bathe in the same water. To be fair, things are not all that great for the pauper nurses, but that's no reason to extend your pain onto others. Number 7. Zombie infection insanity? According to one popular theory in the early 1900s, insanity was contagious, like the flu or those fictional zombie movies. For example, in 1907, an insane asylum nurse at the Kings Park Insane Hospital in New York, Nellie Halpin, was bitten by a crazy patient. Shortly afterwards, the young woman showed signs of mental derangement. She was pronounced insane and sent to the psychopathic ward in Bellevue Hospital. I wonder what that deranged behavior was. Number 6. Accidental ignition. Oftentimes, nurses lived in rooms provided by the insane asylum. That was the case for Fairy Murphy in 1912. She had been a well-liked nurse at the asylum in North Dakota for 3 years and wanted to brighten the floors in her room. Fairy lit her alcohol stove and began melting paraffin wax, but by some freak accident, her hair caught on fire. She screamed and thrashed, causing her clothing to also light up. Nurses and doctors ran to her aid, but it was too late. After they put out the fire with her bed covers, they saw that her burns were deep and severe. She was not going to live. Being conscious and in extreme pain, Free was able to tell her co-workers what had happened and was able to leave a final written message to her mother and sister. Number 5. Cutting edge. In 1906, Nurse Wick was doing her job at the Matawan Hospital for Insane Criminals when one of her patients grabbed a pair of scissors and began stabbing her. How this patient got hold of the scissors is unknown. In all probability, patients were at that time allowed to use sharp objects while doing busy work prescribed by the doctors. Sadly, the nurse did not survive the attack, and no one really seemed surprised by the inmate's behavior. After all, the inmate had previously ended the lives of her mother, husband, and daughter. Number 4. Cruel and unusual. Creedmoor Psychiatric opened in 1912 as the farm colony of Brookline State Hospital and is still running in Queens. There are some places that have been abandoned to rot, most notably Building 25, which the hospital ceased using in 1975. This ward gained its reputation from a series of reports documenting brutal treatments of patients. In the 1970s, rumors began to emerge about an abundance of patient abuse, including executions, self-demise, and beatings. In 1984, a nurse's aide hit a patient in the throat with a blackjack. The man, Robert Venegas, was restrained in a straitjacket at the time and passed away due to asphyxiation. The aide had crushed his throat. At number 3, the body stain. Built in 1874 and originally intended for tending to tuberculosis patients, Athens Lunatic Asylum housed patients far over its capacity for many of its functioning years. This overcrowding caused the care for each patient to decrease until the hospital began abusing its patients. Athens, also called the Ridges, is notable because of its famed physician Dr. Walter Jackson. Dr. Jackson was a big fan of the transorbital lobotomy, calling it the cure-all for every mental illness. He performed over 200 lobotomies during his time there. While there were hundreds of passings when the hospital was open, the most famous is that of Margaret Schilling. She went missing while on the ward, and either no one noticed or no one cared. Over a month later, her body was found in a locked room in an abandoned part of the tuberculosis ward. Her body left a gruesome stain on the ward floor that can still be seen today. Number 2, ice therapy. Open to ease the overpopulation of the other 2 mental hospitals in Newtown, Fairfield Hills quickly overcrowded itself and resorted to unconventional methods of treating its patients. Aside from the then normal lobotomies and thorazine prescriptions, this hospital became known for its use of hydrotherapy. You're thinking that's not so bad, right? Not exactly. Used as a calming method, this treatment involved patients being submerged in ice water, sometimes for more than a full day. They were not permitted out, even to relieve themselves. At number 1, shell shock scare. The Trans-Allegheny Hospital opened its doors in 1864, just in time to begin admitting soldiers from the Civil War. At the time, there was no understanding of shell shock or post-traumatic stress. The doctors treated their understandably traumatized patients by doling out lobotomies and other brutal tactics. During the century it was running, thousands of patients passed away there. Most were buried in mass graves on the grounds, and its most famous patient, Charles Mason, lived there in the latter years of the hospital's functioning. After decades of mistreatment and abuse, the Trans-Allegheny closed its doors in 1994. You can now visit the Trans-Allegheny with one of their ghost tours. Maybe don't stay overnight though. At number 10, we have Cellular Jail, also known as Kalapani. This prison is notorious for terrible conditions for the inmates. Reportedly, prisoners could face torture, medical tests, forced labor, and, for many, execution. The inmates have tried to go on hunger strikes to protest the terrible conditions. However, the guards began force-feeding them anyways. The prison is located in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and being sent here is the equivalent of a living execution. If a prisoner were to complain, they'd be subject to extreme torture methods. One of them being that they would be forced to wear coarse clothing that was rough on their skin and scratch their skin for 3 months. Many escapes were attempted, but prisoner 12819, Maytab, and prisoner 10817, Choi Toon, came the closest to succeeding. According to The Guardian, they stole away from the islands on March 26, 1872, rowing out into the Bay of Bengal on homemade rafts across a 750-mile stretch of turbulent water, dodging schools of bounty hunters who fought over 250 rupee rewards, which was then 25 pounds. islands. Picked up by a British vessel, they persuaded the crew that they were shipwrecked fishermen and eventually pitched up, free, at the Strangers' Home for Asiatics in London. The two were fed, clothed, and given a bed, but while they slept, Colonel Hughes, the home's proprietor, took photographs that were circulated around the empire. One morning, Maytop and Choi Toon awoke to find themselves shackled and frog-marched aboard a ship bound for India. At number 9, Chennai's Pushal Prison. Back in the days of it being commissioned, this prison was brutal. Prisoners had no access to water and cleaned their toilets with mud. Even when they had access to water, they had to choose whether to wash themselves or their clothes. Nowadays, it seems the prison has changed its ways completely. Additional Director General of Police and Inspector General of Prisons, Ashutosh Shukla, told The Hindu, the facilities provided to A-class prisoners are portrayed as a luxury. Mattresses, clothes, cots, tables, private cooking, and eating vessels are permitted to the prisoners of A-class as per Tamil Nadu Prison Rules 1983. There is nothing unusual. If a prison can afford to wear a suit inside the prison, we can't prevent that. Wearing shorts and shoes are also permissible. The prison does have one very big problem that seems to keep rearing its head. Prisoners keep getting cell phones somehow and taking hilarious selfies in their cell. The prison authorities removed 18 television sets after they found that inmates were using the USB ports in them to charge mobile phones brought in illegally, sources said. At number 8, Moradabad Central Jail, Uttar Pradesh. This prison has a maximum capacity of 650 inmates, but actually houses 2,200 prisoners. As they all share cells, they sleep in shifts. The lucky ones get their own cell, which is only 6 feet by 2 feet. For comparison, the average American cell size is 50 to 70 square feet. What's worse? 70% of the total 300,000 inmates in India's 1,356 prisons have not been convicted of any offense. They are under trials, most of them victims of police high-handedness and a grindingly slow judicial system. Of them, nearly 2,000 have spent more than 5 years behind bars without being convicted of any crime. At number 7, Begusarai Jail in Bihar. Begusarai Jail in Bihar was such a terrifying experience for an 18-year-old Amit Kumar that he still wakes up screaming from nightmares of police boots crashing into his body and faces of hardened criminals staring at him. Kumar was released on June 13th after spending 72 days there. He was arrested on charges of facilitating a neighbor's abduction. Tortured to make him confess to the crime, he was released only after the abducted boy's body was found and another neighbor confessed to the crime. India Today conducted a massive investigation into the jails in India and discovered a huge crime ring within the biggest prisons. At number 6, Bur Jail. In Patna, almost every major crime is linked to the gang lords lodged in Bur Jail. In February 2011, under trial Bablu Mishra, accused of selling spurious liquor, was beaten to passing in Bihar's Nawada Jail at the behest of the powerful liquor mafia, which feared that Mishra would spill the beans. Bur Jail in Patna is one of the largest prisons in India, headed by Shri Jitendra Kumar. He is also known to control the illegal activities inside the prison. Kumar is a 1995 batch officer and has experience of working as the central jail superintendent for more than 10 years. He is considered a no-nonsense cop. Corruption is a large problem in India as well. Often cops accept bribes from inmates to turn a blind eye to them smuggling things behind bars. At number 5, Delhi's Tihar Jail. Tihar Jail is one of the most corrupt jails in India. Rajiv Agarwal managed to smuggle in a BlackBerry phone. It is not known how long he had the phone before it was recovered from his cell during a surprise check. A page 3 prisoner accused of a white-collar crime disclosed how he managed to use his satellite phone undetected in the prison for 2 years. According to him, life in prison can be comfortable if one has money and is not in the media glare. From pizzas to chicken from Mario's Bukhara to the best quality booze, everything can be arranged for the right price. It's just that the chicken has to be boneless and the liquor clear like gin, vodka, or white rum. I calculated that one needs about 20 million rupees a year to live comfortably in jail, the former Tihar inmate said. At number 4, Yerwada Jail, Pune. This is the famous jail that Mahatma Gandhi spent several years in during his Quit India movement. It is one of the biggest prisons in South Asia and the biggest one in the state of Maharashtra. It can house up to 5,000 prisoners at once. During his 1932 imprisonment, which started after his arrest in January 1932, Gandhi went on an indefinite fast to protest against the communal award for depressed classes on the 20th of September 1932. He discontinued his fast after signing an agreement called the Pune Pact with the leader of depressed classes, Dr. Ambedkar, in jail on the 24th of September 1932. Gandhi was released from the jail in May 1933. At number 3, Parapana Agrahara. So apparently India holds a yearly competition during a hygiene meeting to determine which prison has the most amazing hygiene out of them all. Parapana Agrahara has taken the prize. Yes, they have prizes for first place. Around 1,319 prisons from across all states and union territories had participated in the contest, which was held in Ahmedabad recently. Quality of the food, livelihood, and health of the prisoners, cleanliness inside the prison compound, maintenance of toilets and bathrooms, safety, security, and duty deployment were some of the parameters which were surveyed as part of the competition. A competition on how clean a prison is seems a bit oblivious to the reasons a prison exists for. At number 2, Madras Central Prison. Madras Central Prison used to be one of the largest prisons in India, but had all of the inmates transferred to a different prison. It was originally built to house transit convicts who were to face the Sazai Kalapani in Cellular Jail. In 1999, some of the inmates rioted following the passing of an inmate named Boxer Vadavelu. They set fire to a room where the assistant warden had taken refuge. Riot police were called in to contain the riots. The police initially used tear gas to quell the rioters before resorting to live ammunition. In the battle which ensued between the inmates and the riot police, 10 people, including a prison official, were executed, while more than 100 people were injured. At number 1, Sanganer Open Prison. Open prisons aren't a known concept in the West, but let me break it down. Open prisons have minimal security. Sanganer Open Prison gives prisoners 12 hours to roam every day. At the end of the day, the inmates must return for a head count. The system is completely trust-based with the prisoners. Admittance to India's open prisons is similar to how parole works in many countries. Prisoners are transferred from conventional prisons into open ones based on a range of criteria such as behavior, motivation to reform, and physical and mental fitness. Number 10, Abashiri Prison. This penal institution is located in Abashiri, Hokkaido Prefecture. Constructed in 1890, this prison was a staple in the culture back in 1965 for a film that came out that year titled Abashiri Prison, which detailed fictional stories from the very real prison. In April 1890, the Meiji government sent over 1,000 political prisoners to the isolated Abashiri village and forced them to build roads linking it to the more populous south. Initial conditions were extremely harsh, with insufficient food and rest, and over 200 prisoners passed away from malnutrition, accidents, and as punishment for attempting to escape. Abashiri Prison later became known for being a self-sufficient farming prison and was cited as a model for others throughout Japan. The prisoners who were held there included politicians, activists, spies for the Soviet army, and former Yakuza. The prison now has a museum dedicated to the legacy of the prison and its notable prisoners, and is the only prison museum in Japan. Number 9, the Tokyo Detention House. The Tokyo Detention House is located in the Katsushika Prefecture in Tokyo and is operated by the Ministry of Justice. This prison contains one of only 7 execution chambers in Japan. All executions in Japan are carried out by hanging. The execution chamber in Tokyo has a trap door which is operated by one of the 3 buttons in the next door room, which are simultaneously pressed by 3 prison staff members so that none of them will know who activated the drop. Before entering the execution chamber, the condemned person passes a Buddhist statue of Kannon, a bodhisattva associated with compassion. The execution chamber has 2 sections, with both of them together no larger than a 15 tatami mat room. When the execution happens, the body drops into a room below the execution chamber. It is in this room where execution is confirmed. The prison's main purpose is to detain people awaiting for trial, convicted felons, and those sentenced to execution. Number 8, Osaka Detention Center. Osaka Detention Center is a correctional facility in Miyakajimaku, Osaka. This prison is another with an execution room, used to hang notable executioners. Osaka Detention Center was in the Japan Times for a controversy in 2019, where it was reported that some essential things for prisoners were much too expensive than normal. This is what they said in the article. Tissue paper and other daily products sold at Osaka Prison are so expensive that inmates mostly cannot purchase them, a situation amounting to a human rights violation. According to local lawyers, the Osaka Bar Association advised the prison to make improvements in a statement dated March 29th, after finding that 800 pieces of tissue were being sold inside the prison for 594 yen, some 4.5 times higher than the market price. Number 7, Nagoya Detention House. This correctional facility is located in Higashiku, Nagoya, housing one very notable inmate, Tsukasa Kanda. Tsukasa was one of 3 people who executed a woman after parking a van on a road waiting for someone to ambush. The other 2 people involved were Kawagishi and Hori. They found their victim and robbed her of her ATM cards before hitting her in the head with a hammer approximately 30 times, while simultaneously choking her with a rope. Capital punishment is a legal penalty for executioners in Japan, but the general sentencing guideline means that execution sentences are not usually passed for a single execution committed. Fumiko Isogai, whose only child was executed in this crime, launched a campaign to call for the execution penalty for the 3 executioners in September 2007. Within 10 days, her petition was signed by 100,000 citizens. She presented her petition for the execution penalty with some 150,000 signatures to the District Public Prosecutor's Office of Nagoya on the 23rd of October 2007. About 318,000 citizens had signed her petition by December 2008. Although single executioners rarely face an execution sentence in Japan, it was expected that the recent trend towards stricter punishments, backed by the growing public support for capital punishment, would encourage the court to sentence Kanda and Hori to execution. Kawagishi's and Kanda's fathers also asked the court to sentence their sons to execution. Kanda was then sent to Nagoya Detention House and hung for his crime. Number 6. Kusatsu Special Prison. Kusatsu Special Prison was a prison that operated between 1938 and 1947 in Kuryu Rakusen-en Sanatorium in Kusatsu Onsen, Kusatsu Town, Gunma Prefecture, Japan, where criminals in public leprosariums throughout Japan were imprisoned. Prisons for conventional crimes had been built earlier in all public leprosariums. 22 out of 93 prisoners passed away of cold or maltreatment in the cells or after confinement. In Japanese, it was called Tokubetsu Byoshutsu, which translates to special ward, or Ju Kanbo, which translates to prison for severe crimes. There were 8 independent cells. Each cell was less than 4.5 meters in size, with wooden floors with a hole in it as a latrine. There was a small hole for the distribution of meals. There was no heating system. The cells had tall walls and were physically separate from each other, each cell being a separate building entity. The temperature would often reach negative 20 degrees Celsius. Administration, maintenance, and repression were roles partaken by male nurses. Number 5. Kikuchi Medical Prison. In 1909, the first public leprosariums, or sanatoriums, started in Japan, with wandering leprosy patients which included criminals. In 1915, the treatment of criminals was discussed by directors of leprosariums. In 1916, the decisions of confinement and custody could be made by the directors of leprosariums, such as imprisonment of less than 30 days within leprosariums and reduction of meals. Between 1912 and 1951, there were various riots within the leprosariums. In 1939, a special prison was started within the Kusatsu leprosarium, which led to the Kusatsu Special Prison incident. In August 1947, members of the Japan Communist Party visited the special ward and found that 22 criminals passed away in the special ward or after imprisonment. However, responsible persons could not be punished. Discussions by diet men, officials of the Ministry of Welfare, and directors of leprosariums and representatives of leprosy patients agreed on the necessity of a prison. Number 4. Fuchu Prison. It is located in the city of Fuchu, Tokyo, to the west of the center of Tokyo metropolis. Before the end of WW2, Fuchu Prison held communist leaders, members of banned religious sects, and leaders of the Korean independence movement. Fuchu Prison was opened in June 1935, after the need for a new and larger prison was determined by the Home Ministry, in a review following the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, during which Tokyo's main prison, Sugamo Prison, was destroyed. During the pre-conflict period, the prison also housed many political prisoners as well as common criminals. After the conflict, the prison was visited by Harold Isaacs of Newsweek, French correspondent Robert Ghislaine, John K. Emerson, E. Herbert Norman, and Dome reporter Tei Tataishi. The 1968 300 million yen robbery took place outside of the walls of the prison. The prison was home to former Yakuza, foreign inmates, and executioners. Number 3. Tokushima Prison. Tokushima, 520 kilometers west of Tokyo, converted a building to house elderly inmates, putting itself at the forefront of an effort to cope with Japan's graying prisoner population. The prison holds prisoners all the way into their old age, not even letting them leave then. I have a heart condition and used to collapse often at the prison factory, said an 81-year-old inmate at Tokushima, imprisoned for life for ending a taxi driver's life and injuring another person 6 decades ago. Prison rules forbid publishing his name. Number 2. Sugamo Prison. The rules at Sugamo Prison are strict. The jailers were inside the prison cell block with the prisoners, and the guards were stationed outside anywhere from towers to hallways to entrances. No hands were to be laid on the prisoners unless there was a dire emergency. There were no problems. Each prisoner had a single cell to himself. A jailer watched them 24 hours, unless they had been removed for court. The prisoners were required to sleep with a dim light on, and their hands had to be outside of the covers. They were allowed 1 hour of exercise a day and could communicate with each other for brief amounts of time. One of the major concerns was prisoner self-harm, yet in the cell block with the older men, there had been no attempts for anyone to take their own life. Number 1. Yamaguchi Jail. The nation's first prison operated by the private sector opened in Mine, Yamaguchi Prefecture. The Mine Social Return Promotion Center, built on 28 hectares, does not have any inmates yet. It will soon begin accepting prisoners serving time for their first criminal offense. The prison has the capacity to hold 500 men and 500 women. I hope you will live up to expectations and trust toward realizing safe communities by offering high-quality correctional education, making use of private sector creativity. Justice Minister Jinen Nagase said in an inauguration speech. The government has consigned most of the prison's operation, including security, job training, and cleaning, to an operating company set up by concerns including a major security firm. The 51.7 billion yen contract runs for 20 years. At number 10, Cho Yong Chol. Cho Yong Chol was one of the vice premiers of North Korea and deputy minister of construction and building material industries. He appears to have disappeared from public life after December 2014. In August 2015, South Korea's Yonhap news agency reported that, according to a source who demanded anonymity, he is believed to have been executed in May 2015 after opposing the policies of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un on forestry. He was 63 at the time of his passing. Not much information is known about Yong Chol, all of it seemingly destroyed or hidden by North Korean government. At number 9, Yang Song-taek. On the 12th of December 2013, Yang was tried by a special secret military tribunal of the Ministry of State Security and executed by firing squad, according to state media. Chinese media and North Korea experts suggested that Yang Song-taek's fall reflected a rejection of his efforts to prioritize economic development, and a victory for North Korean advocates of a military-first policy. Chang Yong-suk, senior researcher at the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies at Seoul National University, said Yang was the only one in the North who could talk about economic change. So when I heard of Mr. Yang's execution, my first thought was that it was a demise notice for those of us who had hoped for economic reform in the North. Number 8, Kim Chol. Kim Chol worked as a vice minister in the North Korean army. He was allegedly purged and executed in spectacular fashion for drinking and carousing during the period of mourning for Kim Jong-il. South Korean media reported that he was exploded by mortar bombardment and not shot by firing squad. However, foreign policy observed the claims probably originated from gossip and noted that stories about violent passings of North Korean elites tend to be exaggerated. Kim was one of 14 senior party, military, and government officials who were purged during Kim Jong-un's consolidation of power. Although he was held in prison, the execution was likely committed outside to avoid, well, destroying the prison. Number 7, Moon Kyung-jin. Moon Kyung-jin is a possibly deceased North Korean violinist who was formerly the head of Unhasu Orchestra. He was reported to have been executed in August 2013 along with others. Moon has received numerous awards and recognitions from the North Korean government during his career. In 2005, Moon won a competition held in Hungary. He performed with the Unhasu Orchestra at the Celle Playel Concert Hall in Paris on March 14, 2012. At the time, Moon told Associated Press, "Despite differing languages, we hope that we can easily understand each other through music and become friends," in an interview conducted shortly before the Parisian performance. According to a report, other arrested musicians were arrested as political dissidents or accused of possessing Bibles. The report also said that Moon Kyung-jin was executed by firing squad on August 20th, 2013. Number 6, Ri Yong Ho. On the 16th of July 2012, North Korean state media reported Ri Yong Ho had been relieved of all of his party duties, namely his Presidium Committee membership, Politburo membership, and Party Central Military Commission vice chairmanship, stating this move was due to unspecified illness. A spokesman for the South Korean Ministry of Unification said the move was very unusual. The meeting at which his removal was announced was attended by the entire Presidium, Politburo members, and candidate members, making ill health seem implausibly minor. Ri was replaced by Cho Yong Chol in the role of the Chief of the General Staff. On the 20th of July 2012, unconfirmed reports from North Korea alleged that Ri had passed or been injured in a firefight with political bureau troops. In November 2012, the South Korean media reported that Ri was believed to be under house arrest. A 2015 report stated that Ri Yong Ho had been executed in 2012. A lot of differing reports. At number 5, Pak Ju-hong. Pak was an official of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea. According to South Korean media, he had held the post of Deputy Director of the North Korean Workers' Party Administration Department. Pak was involved with the Ministry of People Security. Consequently, he made multiple appearances at leader Kim Jong-un's on-site visits. Pak was among the closest associates of Yang Song-taek. For instance, he accompanied Yong on a field guidance tour led by Kim Jong-un. They inspected Okryo Children's Hospital. According to a report distributed to overseas diplomatic missions of North Korea, the 16 closest associates of Yong were executed. The list included Pak Jong-hong's name. The report stated that he was executed for showing disloyalty to first chairman of the National Defense Commission, Kim Jong-un. However, the report had not been independently verified. Pak was reported to have been purged at the time of Ryong Chong-song's purge, as both were censored from articles available at the Uri Minzokiri website. At number 4, Pak Nam Gi. In March 2010, it was reported by news agencies including Yonhap, Bloomberg, and The Guardian that Pak had been tried and then executed by firing squad in Pyongyang for the offense of being a son of a bourgeois conspiring to affiliate the ranks of revolutionaries to destroy the national economy. According to The Guardian, he had been denounced as a traitor during a meeting in January 2010 and arrested on the spot. This related to the devaluation of the North Korean won in November 2009, which led to a crisis after rendering many people's savings valueless. Although John Park, a Stanton Jr. faculty fellow at MIT, claimed in 2012 that Pak Nam Gi is still alive and had resurfaced after his alleged execution, Ri Jae-gong, the former first deputy head of the WPK Organization and Guidance Department, says Pak Nam Gi was executed by firing squad in the course of a reactionary purge in 2010. Many inmates and political prisoners in North Korea are denounced as traitors to justify the executions of them. At number 3, Woo In-hee. Woo In-hee started an affair with Kim Jong-il. It is not known for certain when they began their courtship, other than it took place sometime in the late 1970s. While being treated for carbon monoxide poisoning, which led to the passing of a man in his car, Woo accidentally mentioned her relationship with the supreme leader. Kim Jong-il had Woo executed for talking about their secret relationship. In 1981, Woo was told she was free to go, but she was instead taken to the Kangkon Military Academy shooting grounds, just north of Pyongyang. She was tied to a post and shot in front of 6,000 people. 12 gunmen each fired 10 rounds from their AK-47s, mutilating her body beyond recognition. Woo's husband, Yoo Ho-sun, was forced to watch the execution. At number 2, Cho Mansung. On the 5th of January, Cho was arrested by Soviet soldiers and detained in Pyongyang's Koryo Hotel. For some time, he was kept under comfortable conditions at the Koryo Hotel, from which position he continued to vocally oppose the communists. The Soviet civil administration discredited Cho by spreading rumors that he had collaborated with Japan. He stood in the 1948 vice presidency election, but by then the communist influence in the country's affairs was too strong, and he was unsuccessful, receiving only 10 votes from the National Assembly. Cho was later transferred to a prison in Pyongyang, where confirmed reports of him end. In June 1950, days before the North Korean invasion of South Korea, the northern and southern governments reached a tentative agreement to exchange Cho and his son for jailed South Korean Workers' Party leaders Kim Sam-young and Yoo Joo-ha. However, by June 24th, the two sides could not agree on a modality of exchange. After the start of the conflict the next day, Kim and Yoo were executed at Namsan in Seoul. Cho is generally believed to have been executed along with the political prisoners during the early days of the Korean conflict, possibly in October 1950. At number 1, Pak Hong Yong. According to secret documents of the former Soviet Union released in succession until 2002, Kim Il-sung and Park Hoon-young always acted together until the delayed plans of the conflict were finally decided. Kim Il-sung and Park Hoon-young were also on hand during their visit to Moscow from the 30th of March to the 25th of April 1950, when they were approved for conflict by Stalin. During the visit, Kim Il-sung and Park Hoon-young met Stalin and got written instructions of detailed conflict plans. Pak Hong Yong was arrested on the 3rd of August 1953 in a purge of the former members of the Workers' Party of Korea by Kim Il-sung. On the 15th of December 1955, he was sentenced to execution for espionage. The date of Pak's execution is uncertain, though sources suggest that he was executed that same month. Number 10, Folsom State Prison. Opened in 1880, Folsom is the state's second oldest prison after San Quentin, and the first in the United States to have electricity. Folsom was also one of the first maximum security prisons. It has been the execution site of 93 condemned prisoners. Musician Johnny Cash put on 2 live performances at the prison on January 13, 1968. These were recorded and released as a live album titled At Folsom Prison. He had written and recorded the song Folsom Prison Blues more than a decade earlier. An insane escape attempt also occurred here. Approximately 40 inmates had been waiting to talk to Warden Clarence Larkin concerning upcoming parole hearings when 7 of the inmates suddenly attacked him. As they took him into the yard, other guards started firing. In the commotion that followed, Officer Harry Martin and Warden Larkin were both stabbed to passing. Number 9, California State Prison, Corcoran. Built on what was once Tulare Lake, home to the Yokuts Native American people, the facility opened in 1988. The prison hospital was dedicated in October 1993. In March of 1993, at Corcoran, prisoner Wayne Jerome Robertson took advantage of Eddie Dillard, a prisoner about half his size. After the latter was reassigned to his cell, Robertson, who had the nickname Booty Bandit, testified in 1999 that prison guards set up the attack. Dillard testified in the same trial. After Robertson was assigned to general population at Pelican Bay State Prison, California State Senator Tom Hayden stated, "It is almost certain that he would be targeted for execution." Number 8, California Correctional Center. CCC's mission are to receive, house, and train minimum custody inmates for placement into one of the institution's 18 Northern California conservation camps, and to provide meaningful work, training, and education programs for inmates who do not meet the criteria for assignment to a conservation camp. It has 1,100 acres, including Level 1, open dormitories without a secure perimeter housing, Level 2, open dormitories with secure perimeter fences and armed coverage housing, and Level 3, individual cells, fenced perimeters, and armed coverage housing, and camps. As of fiscal year 2006-2007, CCC had 1,184 staff and an annual budget of $139 million. As of September 2007, it had a design capacity of 3,883, but a total institution population of 6,093, for an occupancy rate of 156.9%. Due to AB 109, the inmate population was reduced to 2,889 as of March 13, 2012. Number 7, Avenel State Prison. In the early 1980s, almost everyone in the town of Avenel desired the prison to be built to improve the economic status of the town. It was reportedly the first prison to be solicited by a local community. As of 1984, the plans were to build the largest enclosed security compound in the nation. Despite some opposition, Governor George Deukmejian signed a bill into law in September 1985 to authorize $117 million from existing prison construction funds to build the prison, and groundbreaking occurred in December 1985. The first inmates arrived in January 1987. According to newspaper articles, the original name of the prison was California Correctional Institution at Avenel, which the Kings County Board of Supervisors changed to Avenel State Prison in December 1987. Number 6, Ironwood State Prison. ISP consists of 4 Level 3 facilities and an outside Level 1 facility. Parts of the Level 3 facilities have been converted to Sensitive Needs Yard (SNY) housing, and one of the Level 3 housing units has been converted to an administrative segregation unit. Neil McDowell has been the warden or acting warden since 2014. As of July 31st, 2022, ISP was incarcerating people at 112% of its design capacity, with 2,464 occupants. In 2014, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition teamed up with the Ford Foundation and others to host a TEDx conference inside Ironwood, with hundreds in attendance, including Richard Branson. ARC produced a short documentary about the event. A short documentary is accessible on YouTube. At number 5, Valley State Prison. The prison opened in April 1995. In 1996, the city of Chowchilla was given permission to perform a non-contiguous annexation of VSPW. Ted Koppel interviewed many staff, including Dr. Anthony D. Domenico, the chief medical officer of VSPW, in October 1999 for a series of episodes of Nightline. In the expose, the physician was quoted as saying, "I've heard from a particular female parolee at a CDCR-approved conference, inmates tell me that they would deliberately like to be examined, i.e. receive a pelvic examination. It's the only male contact they get." After the airing of the Nightline episode, only D. Domenico was reassigned to a desk job in Sacramento for his description. Currently, this prison houses over 150% of its capacity for inmates. At number 4, Chuckawalla Valley State Prison. Chuckawalla Valley State Prison, opened in December 1988, is a Level 2 medium security facility covering 1,720 acres. Primary housing consists of 11 open dormitory-style buildings on 4 main yards. Each housing unit contains 340 beds. There is also a Level 1 yard which consists of 2 buildings with 200 beds each. The Administrative Segregation Unit, ASU, serves as a temporary home for those who are found guilty of severe rule violations while incarcerated. ASU is composed of 100 cells, each containing 2 beds. The annual budget of the prison is around $83 million. Although the prison was designed to hold 1,738 inmates, in 2008 to 2009 it had 3,222 prisoners, with a staff of 751. At number 3, San Quentin. The oldest prison in California, San Quentin is notoriously known for its violence. It has been home to many infamous criminals, including Charles Manson, Scott Peterson, and Sirhan Sirhan, who assassinated Robert F. Kennedy. In early 2022, the state started the process of closing the deceased row and relocating the inmates, 3 years after the California governor ended executions in the state. Over the years, and particularly in the 1960s and 70s, San Quentin earned a reputation for corruption and interracial riots that were encouraged by the guards. At number 2, you might have heard about Alcatraz Prison in books and movies. It's one of the most frightening and famous prisons in the world. One cannot deny that it is also one of the worst prisons in the world. Alcatraz is a place where inmates causing problems in other prisons are brought, and since it's in the middle of the San Francisco Bay's frigid waters and strong currents, this facility is inescapable. However, there were still some prisoners who tried to escape. All of them were unsuccessful, as most of them got caught. Some drowned or were just listed as missing. At number 1, Pelican Bay State Prison. After Pelican Bay State Prison opened in 1989, guards eager to assert their dominance over the inmates established a culture of violence. Inmates in the security housing unit were beaten, tied, and left naked, or subjected to staged gladiator fights by guards who would intentionally release 2 prisoners from enemy gangs and then shoot at the prisoners after they began fighting. Vaughn Dortch, who was serving a 10-year sentence for grand theft and whose mental illness had worsened since being moved to the SHU, was taken in April 1992 to be bathed by guards after smearing himself with feces. The 5 or 6 guards subjected Dortch to a bath in scalding water while he was handcuffed, leaving him with 2nd and 3rd degree burns. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.